Well, I was so excited by hearing Ammiel and Kate. I thought that my whole mind had been summed up by your research, which is extraordinary. I was doing the same thing in the early 70s when I was looking through Olson's archive with Chuck and George Butterick, and I wish I'd known you then. My own coming into Olson was being involved with Wilhelm Reich, Paul Goodman, the body, and Chuck, we went to college together, but of course he had the presence of mind to take languages there. I was involved in literature and the Mandaриnism and the gentility of Lionel Trilling, and I got as far as John Berryman, who of course was also a Columbia guy, and he was a brilliant scholar, but the dream songs are his own schizophrenia, very much of the body. It's a dance poem. It's a musical poem. It's a dialogue between him and this crazy figure, Mr. Bones. And then I never knew Olson. I remember when he died, I was going down into the subway, and the Village Voice had Joel Oppenheimer's article in it. And I later spent some wonderful evenings with Joel talking about Charles. A friend of mine was taking his class at City College, and I went to his class, and the way that Joel read the poetry was so beautiful. He read Williams, he read Frank O'Hara, he read Olson, and the voice was in the body. And I remember I went downtown, and Joel was living in Westbeth, and the kids were young, Lemuel, and he says, "What can I tell you about Charles?" And the thing opened up, and then we had ice cream afterwards. He said, "How do you like the ice cream?" I said, "This is wonderful." He said, "Well, it's pretty good, but it's not as good as Jack Daniels." He had just, he had just come off the bottle. So I spent, those were the early 70s, and I wanted to meet everybody who knew Olson. And of course, Chuck met Olson when he was 16 with Jonathan Green. They knocked on the door, and Cyclops came out and said, "What do you want?" He said, "We're poets." He said, "Oh, you're poets? Well, you better come in and talk to me." And he sat them down at the kitchen table, that famous kitchen table that Peter Onastis and Jonathan Bayless and Ed Sanders sat around.
They were all there.
Yeah, they were all there. Garrett. And 8 hours later, they staggered out with the marching orders for life. And through... Not marching orders, please. Dancing. The repertoire of the body. So through Chuck, I met Linda Parker, and I went up there and introduced myself. I was with my student, Jim Krell, who was 6'4", and we were doing long before Farini did it. We had a hand video camera, and we were trying to do this thing with Olson in place. And we showed up at Linda's door and said, "Chuck sent us." And she said, well, and she looked at us, Mutt and Jeff, I guess. And she took us in, and we stayed the night. She cooked us cod. And so for the next 10 years, I had the extraordinary experience of when I came to Gloucester, I stayed at the fort and looked out those incredible windows and walked. She showed us the PowerPoints of Gloucester, where she had walked with Olson, and Ghost Dog, this extraordinary creature who was a citizen of Gloucester. He would come and go as he pleased, Ghost Dog. And we walked around Dogtown, and there's a wonderful picture by Lynn Swaggart. I put a little exhibition of my collection of Olsiana up here, take a look at it. And there's a picture of Ghost Dog sleeping on the Dogtown rocks. So having that experience, that primary experience, and then when the Cardonis took back the house, we moved Linda over to Stage Fort Park, which is 2 doors down from Oceanwood Cottage with the paving stones where Olson's mother lived, and that's the scene of "As the Dead Prey Upon Us, They Are the Dead in Ourselves." And that's the poem that opened me to Olson. It came down like a sword, cutting me, and yes, he devoured me, Olson. He said, "You're mine. Your mind will now be mine." So I read this poem, and it's an extraordinary poem, topological. The death in life, death itself is endless. Eternity is the false cause. The not is otherwise. Each topological corner presents itself, and no sword cuts it. Each knot is itself its fire. Each knot of which the net is made is for the hands to untake the knot's making, and touch alone can turn the knot into its own flame. O souls, go into everything. Let not one knot pass through your fingers. Let not any they tell you must sleep as the net comes through your authentic hands. What passes is, what shall be, what has been, what hell and heaven is earth to be rent, to shoot you through the screen of flame, which each knot hides, as all knots are a wall to be shot open by you. And then I heard myself described in a great Duncan poem, Variations on Two Dicta of William Blake. Mental things alone are real, the authors are in eternity. For the heart, my sister, is likewise a dark organ, an inner suitor, my brother, a part of the whole yearning. And there must have been a flood of, an uprush, a change in pulse, for when we see an answer, as the young man in moving answered in leaning forward toward rapture, where Charles Olson read, answered or disturbed some question, the poet's voice, a whole beauty of the man Olson lifting us up into where the disturbance is, where words awaken sensory chains between being and being, inner acknowledgments of the fiery masters. There, like stellar bees, my senses swarm. And then there's this wonderful memoir of John Finch, who was an undergraduate and graduate student with Charles, and it's called The Dancer and Clerk. Charlie would be vastly amused. The ideas of such a gathering, such formalities and tributes. This was at Wesleyan, an autumnal academic gam with Finch, of all people, up on his feet to good move about him. Rest easy, Charlie. I'll be neither jocular nor grave, and I won't tell any secrets as if I knew any to tell. Others, I take it, will talk about Olson, the poet and theorist of poetry, and a friend and aider of those who would live in poetry. I leave that all to them. What's left to me? Well, 6'8", more than a fathom full of moods and memories, one of which I'll choose. A and B, memory 1 and memory 2. Olson the dancer and Olson the clerk. He was a dancer all the while, I'll vouch for it. He would reel and caper as he dressed up for a date. He'd waltz when I lent him $5 and tango when he paid me back. He'd prance improbably when an idea hit him in the midst of talk. Talk. All his talk was tall, on his feet, towering, that sort of thing always. But he was a real dancer, too. A formal, professional, honest-to-God dancer. He danced with the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo on the stage of the Boston Opera House, directed by Leonide Massine once.